All right, welcome to eBay Scavengers. I'm Mikey, and with me today is Jay.
As always.
And today, Jay and I are going to discuss things I won't sell. So these are items that neither one of us wants to sell on eBay, and I shouldn't say neither one of us because it's really we both have our own set of items that aren't necessarily the same thing. So, Jay, why don't you start off today and just say a little bit about what you don't like to sell on eBay?
Sure. So, some things that come to mind really quickly are things like blazers, men's and women's blazers, like you would imagine, like suit jackets or, what a college teacher would wear. Because when I first started, those are one of the first things you always see when you go into a thrift store. There's a whole rack of these really awesome wool and even silk suit coats, and you think, wow, of course people are going to pay a lot of money for this. People pay hundreds of dollars for suits, and then we take them home and list them on eBay, and we'd be lucky if we could pull 15 or 20 bucks from them, and it was just a waste of our time.
So when you're at a thrift store, will you even look at the labels on them or anything?
Yeah, I think for us, we're always more attracted to quality, so we'd be looking after, instead of going after name brands, just if it's wool or just seem well constructed. That's what we're going after.
So, it's funny. I never have sold a lot of blazers, but I sold two last week. And what I think is funny about it is I noticed the blazers move really quickly because I put them up for a low price. They weren't in great condition, but they were well-made silk and wool and good brands, kind of high-end tailor stuff. But they moved really quick because I was selling them for under $30.
Yeah. Maybe that's a thing. Plus, I guess we also learned, too, that maybe not these days, but the more vintage ones, I guess men were still getting their suits tailored. So a lot of them don't have sizes on them. So that's always, we ran across that problem of trying to document the size.
Yeah. Well, I understand that. And I feel like with coats across the board, I'm very picky. It's not just the blazers, but anything that's kind of bulky and heavy to store like that, I really want to know that it's good quality. It doesn't have any cigarette burns or stains, or it doesn't have any damage to it, because they take up so much space. You really got to get it back in dollars about all that storage space they take.
See, so I think this is where we kind of we swerve off from you. Our problem isn't if something is hard to store or hard to ship. It's more about how much we'll actually make from it. So, and I think with clothes, a lot of stuff we won't sell is just because it's not in fashion anymore. So like blazers, I don't see a lot of people wearing those. And things like we won't sell shoes with a tassel on it, just because I think that's more of an 80s style, and I don't see men wearing tassel shoes anymore.
Yeah, I hear you on the tassels. I've since you told me about the tassels don't move, I've been staying away from them. Although I have occasionally sold pairs with tassels.
Yeah.
There's always these exceptions because they're particularly good. But yeah, that's a tip I follow with you. But yeah, we do have a little bit difference with the storage thing, and I think that kind of leads into the next part of the show, which is I don't like to sell big things in general. It's not just the storage, but it fills the car up when you're out yard sailing, when you're buying bigger stuff. The car gets full pretty quick.
Right.
When you're shipping the item, it's a lot more work. For packing a large item better. And there is the storage over time, but if there's any return process on a large item, that gets really hairy.
Real quick, why don't you? I know one big thing for storage for you is, I know we'll probably have a whole show about this, but if you could briefly talk about the storage space that you guys are working out of and why that's important to be aware of what you guys buy.
Yeah, well, our storage space is pretty limited. It's two very small rooms. One is pretty much like an old bathroom, and the other one is oh man, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's a tiny, weird little room.
Right.
It's not even it's like the extension off a bathroom, if that's even possible.
Right.
But we just have a couple of racks in there that we put the items on so we can see things, and then there's bags and cardboard boxes of items that we have to fish through, and they're organized to some degree, but we've hit around about 1,000 items, we've kind of hit our capacity of finding things easily. So we're sort of maxed out in our space.
And so what you were telling me, I don't know, a couple months ago is you guys now have kind of figured out you don't want to buy anything that's bigger than that doesn't fit in a medium flat rate. Is that right?
Yeah, generally a medium or large flat rate box is kind of the limit
Right.
of what I like to sell. And I actually try to buy a lot smaller than that. I'm the guy at the yard sale looking at the watches
Right.
and the tie pins
Yep.
and the, golf cleat accessories.
Yep.
Like I want
mean-
it. I want it super small because it's so easy to organize the really tiny stuff.
I mean, plus my partner, who I think you guys are going to do a whole show on shipping stuff. I mean, she always dreams of having a store where everything just fits into a poly envelope, like a shirt or a tie, and that's all it is. There's no double boxing, no anything. Just throw it in there and go,
Well, there really is an efficiency to the smaller items,
Sure.
just like you're saying with the poly envelopes, you throw it in and go. Because as you scale up a little bit and it's like, oh, I got to wrap this in a box, because it's so fragile,
Yep.
or I have to find the right box for this, which means you have a lot of boxes to store on site as well. It can get really messy. So I've been trying to make it a more pleasurable thing for us to do the packing in the mornings when we usually pack items.
Right.
And, I'm not going to continue to run a store if I have to make 10 custom boxes a day.
Right. Well, before we leave this tangent, I think for us, I think you guys are probably where a lot of eBayers are. They're working out of like an extra bedroom they have or their basement. And that's kind of like where they're going to store everything. And that's going to be their store. And that's awesome because it's totally efficient and you don't have to spend any money on storage. I guess we kind of went beyond that where we filled up our extra bedroom that we had. And we actually built another building behind our house that had an office on top and then underneath had a whole storage area. And then even beyond that, because we live out in a kind of a country place, we had some old like garden sheds that we went and put plywood in to kind of make it more comfortable to store eBay stuff. So basically, we don't let anything stop us now. I mean, we'll buy paintings and lamps and small pieces of furniture and really kind of anything big. Because if I can buy something for $1 or $2, and often the bigger stuff goes for cheap because no one wants to store or ship it. And I mean, we find things that sell for $75, $100, $200 or more,
Now, is that kind of your requirement, when it's a bigger item that's going to be a little more work? Do you have sort of a number in mind?
Absolutely. Like we're like kind of $75 to $100 profit, That's kind of what we're going for. So we know lately we've really been getting into like lamps kind of from the 50s and 60s. I mean, number one is just we just love how they seem. They're just really beautiful, so we can appreciate that. But we kind of like the challenge. I think for things like lamps, we aren't even afraid to take it to a shipping place, like one of those like mailboxes, etc., like places. And they'll actually pack it's for you, and then we just add that price onto the cost. And if someone wants, a $200, it's mid-century lamp, they understand that it has to be professionally packed and are willing to pay an extra $30.
Gotcha. Now, is there anything in that high end where the money's there, it's worth money, and you're going to come across it, but you just won't sell it? Like that you're so frustrated. Not, beyond the blazers and shoes. Like,
Sure.
What kind of items are you avoiding?
Right. I mean, like things like more electronics, like popcorn poppers, or because we actually got that from where we would buy these old popcorn poppers that people would buy to roast coffee beans. And we found that people, I guess, I don't know if they're easy to find or not, but then we just found out that we just don't make enough on them. We buy them for $2, we sell them for $25, and then people would complain because they weren't hot enough, and so we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, those are fairly common at yard sales. I go through little streaks where I find them everywhere. I think the thing that I was into in the early days on eBay and I've given up since is medical equipment. Now, have you had any experiences with eBay slapping you down for trying to put up medical equipment?
Well, what kind of medical equipment are we talking about? Like,
Well, for me, I've had a couple of stethoscopes,
right?
and eBay's been pretty good about that. They didn't get upset when those went up.
Yep.
But I had some EMT equipment, like respirators and things that would be used in a life or death situation, and eBay was very uncomfortable with that. I did manage to push it through have a few sales before they busted me, but they were not into that. And you're supposed to have some sort of professional license, like a distributor of medical equipment,
FDA or something like that. Yeah, no, I've seen. I've been to places where they'll have stuff on sale, but you can only buy them. Yeah, if I have like paperwork. I remember I went to one auction and they had like it's 40. Some kind of medical device that they had, and it looked so cool, and they worked, and they were real cheap because no one there had the paperwork to buy them. And if I just had the paperwork, I could have bought them, so cheap.
So they wouldn't even sell them to you. Without.
I mean, as far as its metal equipment, we told you this, I think, when we first started to buy together was, especially being out in the country, there's a lot of old people. We buy a lot of it's braces. When people have bunions or foot problems, they have those big old braces that they have to put on their feet. We buy those all the time. I mean, we almost get them for free and sell them for $30,
Yeah, I know what you mean about the braces, and I've noticed that there's kind of like a little bit of skill involved with braces. So there's a lot of braces I won't buy. And the ones I'm always looking for are any of them that you can pump up with air, where there's a little like the old Reebok pump sneaker, they have those on the medical equipment.
Yep.
Those are worth so much more. I mean, those are like $80, $100 for. But in terms of other medical equipment, I often won't pick it up because it's clumsy to pack and ship.
Right.
If they're heavy plastic ones.
Mm-hmm. I mean, something else that we won't buy anymore is we were buying old record players. We would find these old portable record players that I guess either you would see in junior high schools or I guess maybe back in the day people would travel around. It's with a record player, and we just don't sell those anymore because we just get too many complaints about there's no needle on it, or they don't know how to change the needle, or it doesn't work the way they want. And when if you have to test stuff and it's hard to test, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I recently had a record experience. It's not the player, but I had bought a box of 78s. It was like $10.
Right.
My partner went and listed all the 78s. She got them all listed really quickly, just in an hour, and immediately we're making sales. We must have made $200 in the first week off them. So that wasn't, and we had tons more records. We weren't even selling anywhere near what we had listed. And they break. They're really hard to pack, and so we had $200 in refunds we had to issue. And I'm not sure that I would do it again. I want to do it again because they're out there and people buy them, but I can't pack them well enough. And I've done crazy stuff. I've taken one record, put it in a large flat rate box, floated it in another box, and it still broke. And I'm like, what? Yep.
I mean, so. I think, for us, I'm always trying to find it's new things to sell. So I think we've talked about going to auctions or flea markets, and I'll see a lot of furniture, really nice furniture, like a small table or a bedside table or something, not huge, but big enough where it can't go in the mail. So I've been trying to research if I could send it by a freight, just to see if I could put it on a pallet or somehow wrap it up and send it to people. And because I do see people sell that stuff on eBay. If you put in certain kinds of furniture, people buy big tables, things like that, and somehow it says freight on there, and I'm just trying to figure out how that works.
Yeah, I wonder, where would you take it so it can ship freight, or who would come pick it up from you?
Well, maybe this isn't the best time to bring this up, or we'd have to have a whole show on it. It's once I figured it out. But it looks like you can do it through a FedEx or a UPS, that they have a freight service, and you just have to find out where their regional a location is, and it either has to be on a pallet or it needs to be somehow like wrapped up in like a big plastic wrap or boxed up, and then they'll take it.
Okay, all right. Well, that's good. So furniture is on your won't sell list, but you would like to sell it.
I would like to sell it, yeah, because again, I'm always trying to find those things that are being sold cheap, and those things always go cheap because no one has room for it or wants to sell it.
Right. Well, that reminds me of just a recent email thread we had with our friend Luke, who went to an auction afterwards, and they had all these gigantic marble tables. So you can imagine the weight of these huge things. And they gave them to him for free, but he didn't have a way to pick them up, and they wouldn't let him use any of their heavy equipment, like a forklift or something. They weren't going to let him drive the forklift around because, he's just some guy who showed up at their warehouse.
I mean, I think this also brings up the topic of, there are some stores, they have like a specialty. Like all they sell are ties, or all they sell are like iPod cases or something. And then there's more people like, I guess, us, where we just sell everything. It's more like a general store. And I think it's interesting for every eBayer has to kind of pick how they're going to go.
Yeah. We've sort of made the conscious decision of avoiding the larger stuff that we don't want to get involved in, and going for the small stuff, and specializing in all the things small, whether it's knives in the kitchen, or it's tiny appliances or small electronics or floppy disks or whatever. But like, it just makes it easier for us and more enjoyable than to deal with the big. Even if we had the space for the big, I'm not sure I'd want to do it because I just hate the packing side of it so much.
Right. And now, weren't you guys also, you sold like salves and tinctures and stuff like that, right? Like wild plants?
Yeah, so for a while, we were harvesting wild plants in our area, and we had all sorts of, plants around us that we'd soak them in alcohol and do an extract of the plant.
Yep.
We had some that were for your belly, like, and we had other types of plants that were more like energy based, and I'm not going to name the specific ones, but anyway, I had posted a couple to eBay, and they flipped out. I was on their like bad boy program for 6 months. They didn't trust me with anything.
Huh.
And I believe Etsy has this policy now too, as eBay does, that you cannot sell any tinctures or salves.
I mean, so why don't you? Did you want to say the plant?
Well, they're specific to my region, so that's why I wasn't going to name them because they only grow here.
Sure. So, I mean, it's not...
Anyway, so in terms of other stuff I won't sell, there's something that my partner always picks up at yard sales. I'm like, put that down, and it's neck massagers. Neck massagers seem to be at every freaking yard sale, every thrift store. There's tons of them. And I always have to tell her in front of everyone there, even if it's a church sale, like, people only want them if they can go on their genitalia. We don't need a neck massager. People want to massage their balls or other things. So, and the other types of massagers sell great, and we pick any of those up we can find that aren't, disgusting.
Right.
So,
I mean, and I think something else that we've kind of run across, I started to buy a used equipment from the Army. There are places online where you can buy stuff like huge pallets of military gear that's coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and I started to buy that stuff, and then we found that some of it we got flagged by eBay, and when I would call them and ask them, they would say the Pentagon flags it for eBay, and then they tell us we can't sell it because because of whatever. They don't want this kind of stuff to get out there, and it's silly stuff. It's like goggles, goggles that will protect you from a shrapnel or bullets, things like that.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't seem like something that they really would need to, limit. But a lot of it's overseas, right? Isn't it related to military gear going outside the country?
True, that is true. Yeah, we sell probably about 25% of all of our products get sold overseas, and the military gear especially was popular. People just liked, sleeping bags and goggles and things like that, bags. And, they kind of put the clamp down on us, and then they would tell us, well, we can talk to the Pentagon, and I went through the government's website, and oh my god, it's like all the I would have to fill out all these forms and all this stuff. I had to send them to get it approved to sell it. It's not worth it.
I gotcha.
Yep.
So, finally, after the stuff that eBay flags you for, there's still like when I'm out scavenging and picking up items, I'm still, and this is something I've learned over time of being on eBay, is I've really learned to filter out anything that's ugly or gross or beat down or has marks or stains. And that takes like some practice to develop an eye for, to really flip through things and find their weakness. Like, oh, this is, someone spilled a coffee on this power supply. You don't want it,
Yeah. No, I think that's kind of an ongoing a theme that's gone through a couple of our shows here. Is just like, I think the more you sell on eBay, the more you realize there's so much stuff out there to buy that you just have to learn to turn things down, as cheap as it may be. It's not worth to get shoes that have like bad soles on them, or a jacket that has like a ripped pocket. Just throw it back.
Yeah, everything you bring into your home, you're responsible for listing it eventually, to getting it to this, seller, or to getting it from the seller to the buyer in reasonable condition. And they're gonna be really upset if there's something on there that wasn't described, or even if it was described, it'll still can be a whole refund process. And I think, Jay, this leads into our next show, which is sort of the dark side of eBay.
Yep.
Which is returns, blocking, negative feedback.
Right. Because, that's where the rubber meets the road. When you mail something out and the person opens it up, it's responsible for how that person feels about it. So, let's talk about that next.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Jay.
Cool. See you.